Can you see the title slide of the slide deck?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. I'm sure people are going to trickle in from some people are in the PatternFly demo, and some people are coming from other meetings, but we have a very packed agenda today, so we are going to get started. Today we're going to hear from Katerina about some of her experiences working with the PatternFly team last sprint. And then I could run through the whole agenda, but you can see it there, and then I will paste a link to the agenda and the slide deck in the chat so that people can follow along. But without further ado, we will jump right into it, and I'll hand it over to Katerina.
Right. Hi all. So yeah, it was very nice working with you in the previous sprint. I really enjoyed working on the React side. And yeah, indeed what you put there, the React console was, I think, the most interesting thing I had to deal with. Yeah, basically, so that package, React console, we were using in Cockpit a lot, but we were using the PatternFly 3. And since we are trying to migrate completely to PatternFly 4, I decided that I should work probably on migrating that component on your side to PatternFly 4 as well. Yeah, most of the work needed there was to basically rewrite in TypeScript and start using components that PatternFly 4 introduced instead of the PatternFly 3 ones. I can actually share my screen and show you the status of it right now because it's not really merged yet. Let me see. Second. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah, basically now I'm in the demo app where I expose the console's demo. It currently looks like this. So basically, that component, I exposed 4 new components in that package, the React console package. 3 of the components are 3 different consoles. It's a VNC in browser console, it's a serial console, and the desktop viewer, which is basically a way that you download a virt viewer readable file. And let me show you. So if I click the serial console, you will see an in-browser window where, yeah, you can basically type in something, and yeah, if you connect it to some VM terminal or some host terminal, you can actually interact with it. And this is all in browser. The same with the VNC console, and the desktop viewer looks like this. So basically, if I click launch here, the button, it will download the file, and I can run it with a remote viewer or virt viewer, some other application that can run this type of file. Yeah, so that's mostly it. Unfortunately, it's not merged yet because I have neglected it a little bit, but maybe, yeah, next release it can be contained. Yeah, so that's mostly from my side. Yeah, it was really awesome to work with you, and I would recommend this experience to anyone who wants to try to move from their team for a while to PatternFly. It was very easy to integrate, and everyone was really, really helpful. And yeah, all the tasks I got assigned were a very good experience for me.
Yeah, thanks. It was great to have Katerina on join us for a sprint. Added some new energy, and I definitely would love to invite people to join us and see what it's like, get front row seat to our process and give your input, be in our meetings. It's great. All right. Next on the agenda, I'm going to pass it off to Rebecca. She has some updates on localization efforts. No, internationalization efforts.
All right, I know this is part of Blue Jeans Bingo, but can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'm going to be speaking today about our recent internationalization project in OpenShift, which was really assisted by PatternFly. They did a ton of work in this area. If you don't know me, I'm a UX engineer in Red Hat UXD. and I'm going to cover briefly first what PatternFly actually did in this space. I'm going to go over what internationalization is very briefly for folks who don't know what it is. And then I'm going to delve into the meat of this presentation, which was our actual recent project. I'm going to go over all the fun stuff, our process, next steps, and our tips for the teams. So how does this relate to PatternFly? PatternFly is something that we use a lot of in the product that I work on. As a developer, I work on OpenShift, and we use PatternFly React for a huge amount of the application. PatternFly recently did a lot of research in the area of internationalization so that they could provide best practices for React and PatternFly users. We were able to take those and actually start an internationalization project in OpenShift. And we hope that sharing this information will help other teams with their own internationalization projects and with PatternFly users, who are also PatternFly users. So what is internationalization? So let's say that you own a US company named Tiny Corp, and you have a great product, you have a lot of customers, and you have a lot of interest, but you're getting some different types of inquiries. So you received an inquiry from a potential customer in China who said that she loves your product and would love to purchase it if it was available in Chinese. You received an inquiry from a customer in the UK who was wondering why timestamps are different than he would expect, because timestamps actually differ between the UK and the United States. When you speak to your development team, they're not sure how to proceed. They want to help their customers, but their code base is in English and they only want to maintain one code base. The solution here is internationalization, or ITN, as you're going to see on some of these slides. And it's basically making your software application adaptable to languages and regions so that you can very quickly increase market share or grow outside of the country or countries where the application is being developed. An internationalization library is one solution for internationalization, and this is something that PatternFly was able to make us a recommendation about. You basically use your own application, and the thing you need to worry about is marking strings. And so these are the strings that you want internationalized, and this is what the internationalization library is going to pay attention to. The library then handles all of the fun stuff that goes along with internationalization, such as detecting the browser language, managing translations, and updating these strings when the language changes. A good library also has plugins that you can use to extend its functionality, and also is able to interface with third-party plugins like moment.js, which is used for dates and times. An ideal project roadmap would look something like this. You want to define your content, your languages, your tools, time frame, POC, and then you want to actually get started with the actual work. An important thing that you need to worry about is making sure that all new code is properly internationalized so that your users have a good experience. In our recent project in OpenShift, PatternFly really helped us with this process. Our actual roadmap looked something like this. As far as content was going, we were focusing on content that was easily available in our front end. As a large application, OpenShift gets content from the back end. We get content from a third party called Kubernetes, and we just don't have access to that data. As far as languages, we're targeting Chinese, Japanese, and we're updating timestamps for the UK market. So those were real examples that I gave you earlier. As far as tooling, this is where PatternFly really stepped in and helped us. Joachim Schuler on the PatternFly team did a ton of research, and he figured out which was the best framework for our needs and actually created a POC for us so that we could anticipate some challenges and then get started very quickly. We were able to extend his POC and then get started on internationalization work in the product. We're also able to work with our design team. Because you have to touch every string that you want to internationalize anyway, this was a great opportunity to standardize some of the content. So Bree Mignano and Abby Donahue gave us some new content standards for capitalization that we were able to implement as a part of this project. We also worked on some testing and figuring out how to test that all of our strings are internationalized. The tool that PatternFly recommended to us was IIT Next. And as you can see from all the logos on this screen, you can use it across a lot of platforms and a lot of languages. You just have to learn it once. There are also some language and framework-specific versions of IIT Next, such as React IIT Next, that PatternFly recommended, and we actually wound up using it for our project. In case you're interested, this is a list of libraries and plugins that PatternFly recommended and that we wound up using for our project. I'm not going to go over them in depth. One of the challenges that we ran into over the course of this project was working with complex directories. Some of the plugins for our internationalization framework, IIT Next, only assumed that you would have one location for your internationalization files, these marked strings that it wants to pay attention to. In reality, our code base is more complicated. So we have a public folder which has code in it. We have a packages folder which has a ton of packages that have code in them. And these packages are often maintained by different teams. They are also often very large sections of the application. If you're familiar with OpenShift, these can be things like Operator Hub or the developer console. And we wanted each of these folders to have their own internationalization files. In order to make this work, we added some bash scripts and node scripts so that we could parse all of these files using the plugins. And we also made it easier to import and export files for translation later on across all of the packages and public folders. We also ran into some testing issues, and luckily we have a lot of subject matter expertise on the team, and so we received help from Christian Vogt and also Rob Hamilton and Dave Taylor on Cypress testing. A third challenge that we ran into was team coordination. As with any project, it's really important to share out information. This was extremely important for us as well because it was a large amount of people working on the project. This 48 people you can see in the Slack channel. We actually had way more people contributing to this effort. So we were very successful with a Slack channel and a Google Doc, and they enabled us to share out information such as Abby and Bree's content standards to packages, to our dedicated admin console team, and then also to folks outside of the company who are actually contributing to our open source project. What's next for us is we're going to finish marking strings and complete internationalization, and then we're going to actually move on to translation and testing. As far as translation and testing goes, we have a Red Hat globalization team that offers translation for certain languages, and then they also have a dedicated QE team that has a lot of subject matter expertise in this area. We were able to work with them to get insight onto what we would need to do for this project, best practices, and then they also did some pre-testing actually on the product for us. We're looking forward to working with them further. Hopefully we'll also see wider adoption after this project is complete. If you're considering an internationalization project, we recommend reaching out to PatternFly, checking out the stuff that they recommended to us. We really had luck with them. And then we also recommend these following guidelines. It's important to start with a well-defined scope and a large POC so that you can iron out edge cases and configuration issues at the beginning. We lost some development time because our POC did not cover all of the different types of components that we would need to cover. As we mentioned earlier, it's also important to take a look at whether your content needs to be standardized. We had an opportunity here and we worked with our design and content teams on this. Because you have to touch every string anyway, this is a great opportunity to improve the experience for your users. Third, keep track of text that PatternFly abstracts. If you're a PatternFly React user, you may need to pass in some custom text or ARIA attributes. Thankfully, the props for these are really well defined and easy to find in the documentation, so it was pretty easy on our end. Fourth, as I just mentioned, make sure that your development team finds it easy to communicate. And last but not least, you may need to do things at the last minute, such as updating your tests or adding additional scripts. Last but not least, I just want to thank everybody who contributed. This was a huge team effort, and I really appreciated working with you on this project. That's it for me.
Hey, Rebecca, just one quick question. This was great, and I just wondering as I'm listening to this, is there a difference between internationalization and localization, or?
Yes, actually. So internationalization is getting the code ready to handle different languages and different regions. And then localization is the actual translation work and the testing work, and like even working with people in that region to make sure it's like correct and culturally sensitive.
So is it fair to say that localization is almost like a subset or a small kind of a internationalization has a larger scope?
Honestly, I think like they're both important. They're very closely related. But I'd say, localization is really the thing that's going to make or break your product when you're trying to get into a new region.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's more about the actual translation. Okay, thank you. I know it's always been confusing to me, the difference between those terms, and a lot of times they get confused.
If we have time at the end, we can totally address more questions about this. And there are a few questions in the chat, so maybe Rebecca, as we transition to the next presentation, you could even engage there. But next we have Alana giving us a content update.
Hello, thanks, Nicole. Let me get this screen share going for everyone. Can everyone see my screen?
Yep.
Awesome. So hello, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Alana, and I am the UX writing content intern on the Red Hat UXD team. And I'm here to give you a little status update and overview on PatternFly's social media strategy, kind of where we've started, the strides we've made, and where we're headed as we close out the year. So it's been almost 6 months since we started bringing PatternFly's social strategy to scale. This is time we can take to reflect on our progress and map what the future holds. So like with any great journey, we started out with a map. And this is what ours looked like. So when I was looking at social strategies to create, I wanted to make sure we started at our roots. So I studied up on who PatternFly is, what makes our community unique, and how we can write that story the open source way. Then we shopped around for different successful strategies from other successful social media platforms, from other design systems. So looking at different strategies they used to engage their users and implement a very engaging and positive social media plan. And then we soul searched to find which of those strategies aligned with the PatternFly mission and the PatternFly way. And then the next step that we're on now is to create, schedule, and share that content with our community. So then we got social with it. As a thought leader on social media, we want to make sure our content educate, enriches, and empowers across both Twitter and Medium. So educating in that we're providing followers and readers with industry-relevant content, best practices, stories, and insights, and enriching those insights and conversations so that they can feel empowered to share those thoughts and feelings and different expertise with our community as well. And we've built our social presence to reflect that. So we're focusing on 3 different motivations: storytelling, thought leading, and remaining open. Storytelling in that we're sharing stories not only through our Medium publishing platform, but also through our Twitter. Thought leading in that we're asking meaningful questions, supporting online dialogue, and writing for all audiences. And open in that we're facilitating positive interactions across our community and evolving our social strategy based on feedback from you, our flyers. And I like to call that open book, open source. So now we have results from this strategy and the 6 months we've had to watch our Twitter and Medium grow. So we'll start with Twitter. In spring 2020, we had about 7,000 to 8,000 impressions per month on our tweets. That just means how many people have opened it, clicked it, seen it on their timeline. Our engagement rate for those tweets was between 1.5 and 2.3%, and we had around 5 tweets per month. So we mainly used our Twitter platform as a way to share PatternFly updates and occasional Medium articles, and we responded to tags and mentions, but we didn't have a lot of engagement with our followers otherwise. Also noting that in May, we started with about 866 followers. And now looking at fall 2020, as of September, we have 896 followers, and our impressions have grown astronomically. So where we were seeing marginal impressions before, now we're seeing 12,000 to 13,000 per month, and our engagement rate has hiked up to around 2.6 to 3%. And we're tweeting more too, 160% more. We have 20 tweets per month versus that 5. And we have 30 new followers who are sharing that content with us. And something that I loved to see was we got the PatternFly Twitter handle. So for a long time, we were at PatternFly_Des. Now we have twitter.com/PatternFly, so people can find us more easily. And our mentions, likes, and retweets were on an uptrend throughout the summer, despite the token social media summer slump, where more people are outdoors, not looking at their timelines, etc. And this is just a graph that reflects that. So usually in the summer, you'd see a dip between June and August, and we actually saw consistent growth. So some highlights from our 2020 in review so far is that we have that PatternFly handle. We have higher engagement and farther reach. Twitter has become kind of what I like to call our thought leadership hangout. We're sharing thought leadership, we're engaging with our own articles, but we're also empowering our followers to share their own insights and engage with each other too. And a recent development we have is what I like to call pattern polls, where we're asking you guys questions on the timeline to engage in a quick and easy and fun way. So our goals going forward for Twitter are to become and stay a conversation starter. So share those internal and external Medium articles, engage with other thought leaders, host thought-provoking polls, and grow the PatternFly voice the best way we know how, by open sourcing it. So sharing knowledge and tips and flyer content and drawing upon our community to make that happen. And these are just some example tweets from the past couple of months. We have a poll, some Medium promotion, and then the Flyer Insights form that we started with back in May. So now we're on to Medium. In May, when we started, we had 80 followers, about 1,358 views per month, and about 875 minutes read per month. We had 2 curations. Curations on Medium just means that the official Medium editors highlight your article as a very important or very forthcoming article in that topic area. And articles mainly focused on PatternFly updates and news similar to our Twitter, and we had no consistent publishing cadence back in May. Now, in October, after implementing our strategy, we have 139 followers, which is 59 new eyes on our writing. We have 1,900 views per month, which is up about 600. We have about 1,500 minutes read per month and 12 curations. So in 6 months, we've gained 10 curations across UX, UX writing, UX design, and writing topics. We have 1 homepage feature, and we have a weekly article cadence, which means that every week we're putting out new content. So highlights from that include the fact that our PatternFly Medium voice is growing. So we have 20 plus writers, and we have new writers writing content for us right now. So this is purely a reflection of our community and how open and engaging you all are in sharing your stories. We also have a more balanced content distribution. So we have PatternFly content and industry content in UX and open source. And from that, we're creating a brand experience as well. We're really fleshing out PatternFly's presence in both of those channels, and we're also making our blog more of a personality base. So in that, we made contribution guidelines, boilerplate copy at the bottom of each article, and a branded article divider, so it's a PatternFly experience with every click. And we also have seen our articles at the forefront of conversations on LinkedIn and Twitter. So these are just screenshots of those contribution guidelines, where you can see that on our homepage, and then our boilerplate copy. So our old one used to read, have a UX story of your own, send your ideas our way. More writers and fresh perspectives can only make PatternFly Medium's publication stronger. And we rewrote that to be more community-centric, reflective of this social media strategy. So now it reads, have a story of your own, write with us. Our community thrives on diverse voices. Let's hear yours. And this is just a collection of different mentions we've had across LinkedIn and Twitter, and we were also in the featured articles portion of Red Hat's UX research newsletter from a couple months ago. So as you can see, we're getting quoted by people in the UX industry. We were also quoted by the head of accessibility at Microsoft. And all around, we have a global reach. There are people from all over the world tweeting and writing about our content. So our goals for Medium really stem from our community perspective. We want to empower more of you to write and contribute. We want to host more topic-based conversations and interviews and tap into current events like seasons, holidays, and social trends to put PatternFly at the forefront not only of industry conversations, but UX and open source conversations as they apply to the world around us. And we want to keep building the PatternFly brand to reflect our community. So let's grow as we go. In the coming months, we'll continue to broaden our by creating, sharing, and engaging with more thought leadership across open source and UX. We'll embrace our community through more Medium features and interviews, and we'll inspire more engagement with Twitter polls, forums, and outreach. So with that being said, this is an outreach portion. We can't do any of that without your thoughts. So at the end of the presentation, I have a link to a Google form where you can give us your flyer feedback on the topic areas you've seen across Twitter and Medium, the post types we have on Twitter, the content cadence, and anything else that you'd like to either highlight or ask about or evaluate going forward. So this slide just has a link to that Google form where you can help shape the rest of our story going into 2021. And this is also a moment where we can promote our Medium writing form where you can submit a topic you'd like to write about. So that's a link to that as well, where you can share your story. Thank you. And I can paste the links in the chat for everybody.
That'd be awesome. I was going to suggest that. Thank you. All right. I am going to quickly give a little state of date pickers and time pickers for any interested parties. So there has been an ongoing effort to provide a date picker and time picker component in PatternFly for a while. The design has existed for a little while. If you can see, no, you can't. Let me stop sharing and make sure I share the whole browser. There we go. The design guidelines that we've built for PatternFly have existed for some time, and there's been lots of discussion back and forth on the best way to implement. And so, as of right now, we do have a date picker that's been released in Core and in React. It does incorporate localization. In this example, you'll see here at the bottom, it's a French calendar, all translated with the correct starting day of the week. By default, we have an English calendar here. So it incorporates a lot of the goals that we had when we set out to build these components. We had a lot to consider, though. The design, the interaction, the accessibility are all top priorities for us as we were implementing this. And we've been finding that every third-party library, every group that's built a date picker or a time picker has their own priorities. The desire for it to be fully keyboard accessible, for somebody to be able to type in the date completely without having to use a mouse, but also being able to select a date from the date picker using only their mouse, are both things that are high priority for us, both in our date picker and in our time picker. So because of some of these unique desires, which we believe are important for a very accessible date picker and for a pleasurable interaction, I guess I'd say, we have been working to actually build our own calendar without any third-party library besides date functions, which help us import information about localization primarily. So we still have some more iterations that are going to be made on these as they're implemented. So right now they're beta. They are definitely, the date picker is something we definitely would love anybody interested to be playing with, giving us their feedback. The API hopefully won't change, so we begin incorporating it, even though it's beta. We encourage people to try, see how it works in your application, see if there's any issues or desires that you have when it comes to interaction and behavior, and let us know what you think. Hopefully at the end of this sprint, we'll have a time picker in a very similar state, ready for experimentation, open for feedback. And there is currently a PR that is open, but it's still a work in progress. It's still a draft. But you can look and see at the next iteration of the date picker component as we begin to clean up some of the calendar behavior under the hood. So hopefully, I know this has been a long asked for component. So if people have any questions or feedback, we'd be very, very much appreciated. That's all I have for that update. We also are going to have an accessibility update from Jessie.
Hello, let me go ahead and share my screen. So I think my updates will be pretty quick. I just wanted to go over some of the main highlights that we've updated with accessibility. We recently talked to a customer using our dropdown that was using JAWS, and he had a lot of difficulty interacting with it. So to give you guys an understanding of what was happening for him, if he would open up the dropdown, he couldn't actually see what was inside the dropdown. He could see that it was expanded, but it wasn't allowing him to go into the drop-down menu and actually interact with anything. It did work with VoiceOver and NVDA, but for some reason JAWS was being finicky. So we tried a number of different things, adapting different ARIA attributes, trying different examples, and eventually what we determined with this one was that we needed an additional event listener to kind of force JAWS to focus on that, like that first item or the last item if they did the up arrow. And then the additional thing that this fixed is that you can kind of switch between controls now as well. So if I click on this, I can also go into it, whereas before that wasn't the case. You could only interact with it if you tapped to it yourself. So this now allows our dropdown to be accessible not only in VoiceOver and NVDA, which it was before, but in all forms of JAWS as well. So now they can go into the menu and see all these items. So that was a huge win on the dropdown. We also updated the skeleton component on a kind of a smaller scale than the dropdown, whereas we just kind of added the ability to add text to the skeleton. So let's say you have a skeleton that looks like this, and you want the user to actually know that something's loading here. Without any kind of information for a screen reader, they would just see it as like a blank page. They don't actually see anything. So we wanted to make sure we added a prop so that you can add text for the screen reader to see. It's not exactly like an ARIA label, which is why I named it differently, but it would just kind of announce to the screen reader that there's loading contents here so that they're aware of that. So that was just a quick update we did for skeleton. We did some additional updates with keyboard interactivity. One of our goals is to slowly and continually add integration testing with keyboards so that we're no longer having to do it quite as manually and making sure that we're never regressing with keyboard interaction. So we're slowly adding more tests. And then also someone found an ability to, Mike Charlie added something to continue customizing our select. And this just allows additional labeling with ARIA label and ARIA labeled by on that specific UL. So just a couple quick updates. Some really cool stuff like that drop down. But yeah, I think that's probably it this time.
Okay, thank you so much. Our next update is going to come from design. I think Matt's going to take over for that.
Yep, thanks. I'll share my screen out. Okay. So I just wanted to give a quick update on things we're working on in design. For the first item, I'd actually like to pass it over to Gina Doyle to talk a little bit about some tab usage demos and guidelines she's been working on. So Gina, can you?
Yeah. Do you mind if I just share my screen and take over?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. And then I'll pass it back off to you after. Okay. So we've been doing a little bit of work on tab usage like Matt was saying, and I'm going to show the marble of kind of like the different examples that we have, and then I'll go into our design guidelines, which guide you with what types of tabs that you would want to use for different situations. But to start with it, we have horizontal tabs. We're recommending that we use the open tab style like you're seeing here for most of the cases that you're dealing with. So this is tabs within a page, and then this is using both primary and secondary tabs in this case. And as you can see, we're using the open tab style for secondary tabs as well. And this is an example of tabs within both the page and then a component here. So this is within a card. So whenever we're recommending for tabs that are used within a component, we'll also use that secondary tab styling. The only difference really is that the spacing's a little tighter and the text is 14 instead of 16. Here's an example of tabs again within a component, but this is for primary detail where we have two tabs over here in overview and activity. And then I also just showed an example of using, if you were to have two more tabs at the page level here, you would use the primary styling like I was saying before. Another example here where you could, in this case, I'm using filled tabs, which means that you fill the area of the content area with the tabs and they center when you stretch them, versus here we're just using them as like the default styling so that they're just placed there without being filled. The other one. Here's an example of tabs within a modal, which it's the same thing as I said before, secondary styling. And then here's another example of if you wanted to mix box tabs with open tabs. The box tabs up here, you can have them have a gray filling instead of white by default, they're selected. So that was that example. And then again, open tabs within a card. One other example of the box versus open tabs, it definitely creates a little bit more of a hierarchy, and depending on what page you're using and kind of like what background you have, you can switch them up if you wanted to. So yeah, box tabs up there are more primary, and then the secondary ones here are open. And you can also opt into having this gray line behind the open tabs if you wanted to create more structure. In this case, it makes more sense because if you didn't have it, they would kind of look like they're floating. And then we have an example of vertical tabs as well. This is kind of like an installation setup where we're using vertical tabs. So those are the examples there, and I've linked the Marvel in that slide. And then we also have this Google Doc, which is both linked to the GitHub issue and it's in that slide as well. So I have not yet put the images in here, but this also just gives more of kind of what I was just saying as I went through those different examples, more recommendations on when to use what styling. And overall, we're just saying that we would want to use the open styling rather than the box styling, although it really is up to you on which one you want to use. So I'm going to still continue to work on this, but it would be great if anybody has any comments or questions or additional use cases that maybe we had missed. If you could comment on that GitHub issue with that would be awesome. We can incorporate those. I'm going to stop sharing and I'll pass it back to you, Matt.
Okay, so thanks, Gina. And as Gina said, we'll be working on getting the documentation and also hopefully some live demos of this into the library over the next couple of releases. And hopefully this will answer a lot of questions I know have been circulating around about recommended tab usage. So just quickly, some other things we're working on. Dark theme, which is kind of an ongoing effort, and all of these links will take you to the related GitHub issues if you want to dive deeper or add your some comments. So as I said, dark theme is kind of an ongoing effort where we're looking at presenting a CSS theming layer to allow you to present a dark theme PatternFly UI, and hopefully further down the road, additional theming. We're been working on defining just an empty state for a card grid, this type of thing where you can have creation state for creating new cards within the grid, and also defining some splitter demos to help better define usage for the splitter component. Here's just one example, and the splitter is being introduced, I believe, in the current release, and we'll continue to elaborate on that to provide sort of a resizable drawer, either horizontal or vertical drawer. And then finally, a marketing card, which defines a card with larger spacing or more optimized for website use. And you can visit the PatternFly design workspace linked here to get a more complete look at what our backlog and work in progress looks like. So any questions? Okay. If not, I'm going to turn it over to Marie Dorshkova, who's going to talk a little bit about recent updates with the PatternFly design kit.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. Do you want me to share my screen, or can you share it? Okay. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to ask you if you can see my screen.
Yep.
Yeah, amazing. Okay, so hey everyone, I hope that you all are doing well. And today I would like to introduce some new updates in our symbol library and a template. The first thing I want to mention is that all pages in a template have been updated with new navigation symbols. But if you use the older navigation in your projects, you have to replace the symbols manually, unfortunately. Then we've added a skeleton loading symbols that allows you to create mocks in a loading state, or it can be useful when you need to create low fidelity mocks, but it depends on your use case and process, and it's up to you. Unfortunately, the symbols are not animated in Sketch. The next new component in our symbol library and a template is a dual list selector. This component consists of two standard boxes with the option to move items from one list to another and back, and they are useful for extended multiple selection in general, especially when you have, for example, huge sets of items. And then we've added a single toggle group item as a symbol that can stand alone without left or right toggle item. You can see it here on the left, on the right bottom. And in a template is now available extra small empty state that can be used inside cards where there is not as much room. And last but not least, we've added a table and a data list of radio buttons. So that's all from the design kit. If you have any question, you can just feel free to reach me out.
Right. Awesome. Thanks. The next update's from Core. Michael's got that one, I think.
Thank you. Let's see if I can share. And I think this is how you do it. There we go. Yeah, so just some updates from the core repository. We've got some new features that have gone in. So you should see these. You can find them on the website, and then you'll see them shortly as implementations in the React component. So up first, we've got a new variation of the empty state. It's an extra small variation. You can see the designs and use case on the examples page for that component. With the data list, the component used to be configured to specifically switch between a more mobile layout and a desktop-based layout at a prescribed breakpoint, and it was our medium breakpoint, around 700 so pixels. And we've extended the ability to specify that layout at your own breakpoint now. So just using any of our the breakpoints available in PatternFly, you can tell a data list to switch between desktop and mobile at that breakpoint, or just keep a mobile or a desktop layout all of the time. So that's in, and then we've got some really great improvements to page sections, and that includes page sections where you'd put content, your titles and tables and all of that sort of stuff, but also the sections that hold breadcrumbs and navs and that kind of thing. So I'll mention the first thing here in the list, and it's section groups. So this is a new element that you can put other sections inside of. It behaves like a section in and of itself, but it's really just for grouping other sections into. And then the enhancement on top of that is sticky sections. And so that applies to both existing sections as they are, but also to groups. And so if you wanted to group 3 sections together and make those sections sticky to either the top or the bottom of the main section area of the application, you can do that now. And we've also added the ability to specify overflow scroll for a particular section. And so if you have overflow content that you want to scroll, instead of just causing the container to grow and push around elements that might be underneath it, you can apply this overflow scroll, and that content will scroll now. And then we've added the ability to specify top and bottom shadows. And this is really for when you're getting fairly custom with specifying sticky sections and scrolling and all of this sort of thing. You can specify a top or a bottom shadow on page sections now as you see fit. It's also worth noting that sticky sections come by default with a shadow. So that's really cool. Up next, we've got an addition to the context selector. It's an actions footer. And so you can just specify your footer element here and then put what you want in it. Specifically, it's designed for placing actions. In the table component, we've added the ability for single row select. So you would have multiple row select with checkboxes already, and this extends that to single row with radio buttons instead. The Modal now supports a bunch of different alert states, and so you can have info, modals, warning, error, etc. And so there's a state with an icon and colors and all that sort of thing for all the different states that PatternFly supports. And then also just extended on top of that, since the wiring is already in place, you can now just specify an icon there in the title if you want to use something different. You can just pass that icon into the component. And then we've added form sections, so it's kind of subtle here, but you can just specify multiple form groups to be in a section. You can use sections adjacent to one another, form groups adjacent to sections, and that sort of thing. And you just get a little bit of altered spacing to denote that hierarchy. Our flex and grid layouts now support ordering, which is great. So you can specify on either a flex or grid layout itself, the parent container, or it's the flex or grid children, their direct descendants. You can specify the order that you want that element to be. And so if you have 5 children of a flex layout and you want the 5th child in the markup to be the first visually, you can specify an order on the 5th and make it the first visually. You can also specify the order at different breakpoints. And so you can specify for something to be at the beginning of the list on a small breakpoint, in the middle of the list on a medium, at the end of the list on a large, etc., all throughout the breakpoints available in PatternFly. And then another enhancement to the modal is a help popover. So you can specify this now. It's associated with the title, and you get a help button over by the close button, and with a popover that you can put whatever help information you'd like in there. And then with an update to the pagination system, similar to the page sections, you can now specify sticky positioning for both top and bottom pagination. And so we already have a top and bottom variation, or a default and bottom pagination. So if you specify sticky to either of those, it will automatically make it sticky to the top or the bottom. And that's it. That's all I've got. Any questions?
All right, thank you. All right, we might get everything in. This is exciting. The last update comes from React. We have a handful of people presenting React updates. I don't even know who's first. Who's first? It's Evan. Evan's first.
Yep. Awesome. I'm going to set that up. All right, so starting off with button, we've got a couple different, actually a few different enhancements that we made here. The first one is adding the progress spinner to the button. So you can see it's got an example here. This is actually one that Katerina worked on. So thanks again, Katerina, for your help here. There's two new props. So if we take a look at this, it's just got the is loading prop that will set that spinner to true or false, which basically indicates whether or not to display that. And then also spinner aria value text. So when the spinner does exist, you can add aria text to it as well. Let's see, the next example was another one from Katerina. So thanks again, Katerina, for the warning. So this is just a new variation for the button, this kind of yellow warning color, and it's pretty straightforward. It is just variant equals warning, which is in here. Here we go. Button variant equals warning. The last enhancement that we had was the inline link as span. And so this is kind of a, I'll kind of talk through the need here. So this is a variation of the inline link button, but it behaves like a regular link text. The reason we needed this is we can't use a native button HTML element and have text display inline and wrap to multiple lines like regular text or links would. So if you have an inline link button that's long and you want it to wrap like regular text, we have to use a span and instead of a button. And so along with that, we add the role equals button, and we also set the tab index to 0 so you can focus on it. So we've got an example here, actually two examples, and I'll show you there's not a new prop, but it's really a combination of two props. So if you add the is inline, which would make this inline button, and then you pass through component equals span, which by default is equal to button, that will automatically trigger this. So it'll go ahead and act just like you'd behave, or like it would behave just like you'd expect. One call out is that, and we have it listed in the second example here, because we're using a span and not a button, the span does not fire the on-click event for the enter or space keys. So you have to manually handle that. So the first example doesn't have that handled. So if you select it and click enter, nothing happens. If you click space, it just scrolls like the normal default behavior. The second example here, we actually do have that on key down event listener. So you can use enter or key and it'll throw an alert just kind of confirming that. So you just have to manually handle that for this example. So that covers everything for button. Next up, we also have some updates to the progress component. So the first, we're gonna give Katerina another shout out for adding the warning progress. So this is just another variant here. Again, adds that yellow warning color, and it just uses the variant equals progress variant.warning to go ahead and implement that. And the second example is one that Zach gave me a lot of help with when I was at office. So thanks, Zach. It's just adding truncation to the progress bar. So you can just add this quick is title truncated prop, and it'll go ahead and truncate the text and add a tooltip when you hover over it, showing that full text. So that's it for button and progress.
Thank you, Evan. Katie's next.
All right, hello everyone. Let me share my screen real quick. There we go. So first up for me, we've got a couple updates for data lists. The first will be Draggable. So this is a new feature for data lists. You'll have a new drag button that you can add to your items that can give you a little bit of styling and the cursor. And if you actually click that and then start dragging, it will drag it. It'll have a copy of the item hovering on your cursor, and there's a ghost placement row that'll indicate where it's going to be dropped. You can drop that and it'll reorder. This will preserve state, so you can have some checkboxes and they'll still be checked when you drop it again because the state's separate. And then this is also going to be keyboard accessible, so if you're focused on one of the drag buttons, you can press like space or enter and it'll immediately start dragging it. The only thing you can do when you start dragging it is to use arrow keys up or down to start reordering. Everything else will be caught until you either confirm the drag with an enter or you cancel the drag with an escape. So if you enter it, I lost focus on it. Well, I think the styling is got a bug there.
Okay, if you pop out the example, it's easier.
Oh, okay. Yeah, maybe it's just getting caught on something. There we go. Perfect. So this is actually done with a new item order property. So if I go back to the code, you'll pass in your list as normal, but you'll give it this new item order, which will then, when it gets to the component side, it will reorder the list based on what draggable order it now has. And you'll be updating this with a new onDragFinish property, which will update this item order based on what the component dragged. And then there's a couple other functions you can hook into for the start, move, and cancel. In this example, we've got a ARIA Live text field that'll be updating as you start dragging items to help for screen readers. So this is just demonstrating some extra functions you can get for accessibility. And then the second thing for Draggable will be one of Katerina's updates for controlling text. So in a data item cell, we now have new wrap modifiers. So you can see in these two different examples here, we've got a break word modifier, so it'll start breaking and wrapping content and force that. And then on this right-hand example, we've got a truncated cell. So it's got similar text, but it's truncated instead of wrapping. And thirdly, instead of, if you really wanted to not have any wrap, you can force that so it'll expand out the entire row. And I think that sums it up for the data list changes. So the last change I'm going to talk about is in Modal, where we now have a top aligns modal that you can pass a prop and it'll actually cling more to the top with a distance from the top that you can customize, compared to, say, a small modal, which is in the center of the screen for justification. And I believe that's it for me.
All right, and the last React update is going to come from Tatani.
Hey, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I have a few things to give updates on. Firstly, the select component. We added support to add a divider component to the select menu. So as you can see here, you can add a divider component anywhere in the select menu. So the code looks like that. You just add a divider. And then next up, tabs. Katerina made this update to add the light variation to tabs. So to demonstrate that, this will set the variation pop to the light right over here. It sets the variant to light 300. For that one. And then for the notification drawer, we added, or Boaz made this update to add a default notification. So the default notification looks like this, where it has the bell icon. So for that, you just set the pop. Well, you don't have to, because it will default to default, so you don't have to set the pop. But you can set it to default if you wish. And then lastly, we have a table update. This update was also made by Katerina. She added the variation for a radial select input. So over here, you can see we have radio buttons to select the row. And for that, you just set the variant to radial. And that's it.
Awesome, thank you so much. So we're a minute over. We don't have time for any more questions today, but a lot of interesting developments and a lot of stuff going on in PatternFly. If you have any questions, I'll be sending out a PDF of all the slides with all the links probably later today to everyone on this call. And then also feel free to reach out to any of the presenters if you have any further questions or feedback. That'd be very much appreciated. This video of the meeting will be posted to YouTube, and the link for the video will be sent out too. And I think that's all I have. Have a great rest of your Tuesday. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Nicole.
Thank you. Bye.